I thought that I would speak to a question that came up as to why we practice this stuff. Of all the stuff we could practice, what's this for in particular? Why is this important for us as therapists or practitioners or coaches to have a sense of? I thought maybe I would demonstrate first with a little story, and then we can talk about some of the bigger ideas with it, but not for too long because there is much more movement to work through. My girlfriend is learning to be a doctor. And part of that is the clinical skills, the checkup, all of this. So she's learning about taking pulses and these sorts of things, listening with the otoscope to the various reverberations in the thoracic cavity. And we were sitting at the dining room table the other day, and she was having a hard time getting a sense of my pulse. And I thought, well, it's because I'm heartless. That's probably why. It's the most reasonable explanation for Michael, at least here. Chandler, heartless, yeah. And and cold, so cold. Vampiric, some might say. Especially if you get a close look at my canines, they're. But I had a different idea as to why it might be. I thought, well, surely if we at least set aside the vampiric qualities, why might there be a difficulty in finding my pulse here? I looked over and I saw that she was on one of the stools. I was on a bench. We've got one of the long farm style, I don't know what people call them, but she was on a bench at the head of or a stool at the head of the table on a cushion. And I said, what's it like if you get rid of the cushion? She sat on the stool, and there's the pulse. Now, that's not just a random coincidence. We might wonder, why did I think the cushion might be important? What would that have to do with her ability to detect a pulse? When our systems are stable and sense their stability, the skeletal support, we reduce the demands for neurological tone through the system. Perched on top of the stool with a cushion there, a cushion's a wobbly thing. It doesn't give you a whole lot of solid feedback. Now, in the absence of that solid feedback, there is a greater necessity for tension through the system. It's as if the system braces itself. And I could feel the quality of touch change when she went from the cushion to the stool. It was a lighter touch. It was a more sensitive touch. And with a more sensitive touch, we're able to perceive very different qualities in hands-on work. Now, I know not everyone is going to be doing hands-on work, and frankly, we're not going to talk a whole lot about hands-on work, but for the hands-on practitioners, having a sense of this skeletal support enlivens the quality of touch we bring to our clients. It lets us do less and perceive more. Now, this is important for more reasons than hands-on work. You will inevitably find a sense of anxiety within yourself when working with a client. We're social animals. We depend on co-regulation of nervous systems. And that can work well for us or not so well. We may find that if we are unaware of our skeletal support, that it's very easy to get caught up in the anxiety that the clients bring to us, because the clients, of course, they're feeling anxious because they're dealing with these problems, they're dealing with pain, they're dealing with stress, and there are all these things that they don't know the answers to, and they're really hoping that we have the answers, and they may actually infect us almost with that sense of anxiety. But if we can find the backs of ourselves, if we can find our sit bones, if we can find that skeletal sense, we're able to kind of take that and hold it and send it somewhere. We're able to catch that anxiety they're throwing, so to speak, and not be destabilized by it, but to put it somewhere, to send it down so that it can take root. Now, this is a useful thing I mentioned in terms of hands-on work. It's useful in terms of co-regulation between organisms. It's useful in sales, quite frankly. I talk about this often when I'm consulting with people on sales and enrollments. Where are your sit bones when the person raises an objection to your price, to your offer? Do you, well, I mean, I guess it is a little high. I mean, yeah, we could cut it down if you'd like. Or are you here with a full abdomen and your sit bones saying, well, that's how much it costs. If you need alternate arrangements, we can come up with that, but on and on and on. For hands-on work, for interpersonal regulation, for sales, and beyond that, if we're doing any sort of coaching work, any sort of spoken facilitation, if we're making use of the talking cure, this analysis is often referred to. The thing that we don't want to give our clients is our anxiety. I will send out the recordings from Wednesday. It came up Wednesday. We occupy a very specific role. We do not engage in a symmetrical relationship with our clients, which is defined by, I'll do some of this, you do more of that. You do a bit more of that, I'm going to do even more of that. No, 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 no. Up into an arms race. That's the sort of sibling rivalry style relationship. In some psychological circles, this would be called a relationship defined by the imaginary register. It's the image I'm trying to convey. Well, I know this and you know that. Okay, I know this and you know that. Well, I know this. It's one-upmanship. And generally speaking, relationships defined by that sense of one-upmanship, they contain no provision for their own cessation. They don't have the means to their own end. They just escalate. So that's a symmetrical relationship. There are complementary relationships as well, which are a bit like top dog, underdog, teacher student, guru disciple, parent child. These relationships too can escalate a bit, where one person very quickly becomes the tyrant, the domineering know-it-all, the source of all goodness and wisdom, and the other withers. The other looks plaintively, asking for some sweet morsel of knowledge as to how I can make my life better. Please, is there anything you can do to help me? And it creates a frankly disgusting dynamic of dependency. It's revolting when we see that take place with our clients. Healthy relationships are characterized by the ability to switch positions of complementarity, to switch between complementarity and symmetry. And a therapeutic relationship occupies a sort of third place. It's not defined by this symmetrical, image-based relationship. It's not defined by this complementary, know-it-all, dispenser of wisdom and goodness relationship. It's defined by a third position that's neither here nor there. It's a third position that says, I'm here with you, but I can't fix you. I'm here with you, but I'm not responsible for you. It's, as we talked about in the first week, it's a walking with. It's anticipatory care rather than intervening care. That is to say, leaping ahead and saying, hey, watch out. If you keep doing this, here's what might happen. But not leaping in and saying, let me help you, please. I've mentioned before this idea from the work of Jacques Lacan that all speech is a demand for love. All speech is asking for a sort of validation in return. As I talk through this stuff, there's sort of a hope that, yeah, like a kind of knowing nod. I get it, Chandler, sure, yeah. There's a hope for that. So when we're working therapeutically or in a facilitator role, generally speaking, we want to speak as little as possible. We're not there to fill the space. We create almost a vacuum of sorts where the client is invited to fill that space. They're invited to bring forth the words. They're invited to find solutions. And as we're doing in this sort of work, we can provide situations where they can discover something within themselves. But as an example, no amount of me saying, move from your pelvis is going to help you figure out what that means in an embodied sense. It's when we put together a situation like the one you were just in where you sense, oh, yeah, this makes it much easier to move my head around than does this. You discover that for yourself. So the reason why I think it's so important that we as practitioners have a sense of this, why we practice this stuff, is because I've found nothing more effective than a skeletal connection in terms of mitigating anxiety. And if I can mitigate my anxiety as a practitioner, I am far more effective in my interventions. Whether that is hands-on work, whether that's dialogue, whether that's being with a person who is suffering profoundly and just not being caught up in my own inadequacy. There's a way where if someone I'm with is really suffering, the symmetrical role or the complementary role might be something like, oh, geez, oh my gosh, wow, what can I do for you? Is there anything I can do to help? I don't know if you've worked with someone who's really suffering, really in a bad way, but generally speaking, when you find yourself in that situation where you're in the pit, where you're dealing with the crushing despair of existential human realization, you don't want help. You want to be heard. You want to be with, but you're generally not looking to be fixed. Now, sometimes you are. But as practitioners, if we can be with, regardless of what's brought to us, if we can be with without being caught up in the image we hope to present, if we can be with without losing our sense of where we are in space and our connection to something big enough to hold whatever suffering is brought to us, that makes us monstrously effective. Odds are, for the big things, you probably don't know what the hell to do. And nothing we're going to cover this year is going to help you figure out what to do for the big things. But you know what knows what to do? The goddamn earth. It's seen all of human suffering. It's seen all of pre-human suffering. And if you can sink yourself into that and find a sense of the earth within you, that skeletal sense, that old way back sense, again, you can catch whatever is brought to you and send it. Not to sort of callously dodge it and brush it off, not to say, well, it's out of my hands, but to say, hmm, I hear you. Tell me more. It's when we quiver and wither and quake within ourselves that we stop hearing. That's when we look to find our security rather than help this person find theirs. That's why I think the work you're doing here is so profoundly important. It makes you less likely to wither in the face of the real human suffering that comes up in work like this. The spoiler alert of all of movement as metaphor is that I think any of the practices we engage in are trivial if they're not helping us learn to die well. That's what all of this is really about, is helping a person reach the last achingly long moment of life and find that sense of equanimity. Maintain that sense of composure and be receptive toward the big unknown. Why do we practice finding the little unknowns in these stupid, inconsequential movements? It's not because there's anything valuable about this. It's because it's practice. It's practicing receptivity. It's practicing letting go of the ideas you have of yourself. And it's practice finding a sense of security in the unknown.